I wanna hear the one about the big old plum tree. I wanna hear the one about the giggly bumblebee. I wanna hear the one about the juggly jumping flea. That's the story that I wanna hear. That's the story, that's the story, that's the story that I wanna hear. That's the story, that's the story, that's the story that I wanna hear.
G'day, I'm Ronnie. Welcome to another instalment of That's the Story. This week, we've got yet another theme running through our show. See if you can pick out what this week's theme is. Now, we've got stories, we've got songs. But first of all, if you could turn yourself into any kind of animal, what kind of animal would you turn yourself into?
As far back as Quinn could remember, he could do something that most people couldn't. He could turn himself into other creatures. This was quite a useful skill to have sometimes. When he wanted to taste some of his dad's legendary freshly made apple and feijoa pie, for example, he simply turned himself into a fly and landed on the edge of the pie, sucking up the sweet and warm sticky juice with his newly formed proboscis. Usually Dad didn't notice, and if he did, he was always too slow to swat Quinn the fly. When he wanted to get home from school quickly, he turned himself into a dog and ran all the way. 4 legs are better than 2, you see, so he would arrive home only half as puffed as if he'd run as himself. Once he turned himself into a praying mantis and hung out on the wall of the teacher's staff room for an entire lunchtime. He heard a lot of things that day. He heard that Alice Westing was disruptive in class. He heard that Wide Eddie Farmer was going to move back to the coast. And he heard that Miss Jameson was dating Mr. Hawke. He kept a close eye on those two for the next few weeks. One night, Quinn couldn't sleep. All sorts of things were racing around in his head. Things about home, things about his friends, and lots of things about school. He could hear all sorts of noises coming from outside, banging, wailing, meowing, so he decided to turn himself into a cat and go and investigate. He did what he usually did, held his breath, shut his eyes, and imagined He imagined a handsome brown and sandy striped cat with big green eyes and ears which could hear everything. After 30 seconds, just when his breath was beginning to run out, he opened his eyes and looked over to the mirror. Brilliant, he thought. Exactly the cat I had imagined. Quietly and gracefully, he sprang up onto the ledge below the open window, then dropped down onto the damp grass in the garden outside. He sidled round the corner of the garage to see where the noise was coming from. As he peeked round the edge of the green wheelie bin, he saw 3 cats. A big brown one, a skinny grey striped one, and a fat one with a strange sort of bluish coat. They were arguing. "It's my mouse," said the brown cat. "No, it's my mouse. I saw it yesterday," screeched the skinny grey cat. No, you didn't, because it wasn't even here yesterday," purred the bluish cat. As Quinn looked closer, he could see that the brown cat had one of its huge paws on top of a mouse, which was alive but looking extremely frightened. The mouse had a scratch mark behind one of its ears and was bleeding. Because Quinn was used to turning into creatures of all shapes and sizes, and he knew what it felt like to be those creatures, he hated cruelty to animals, birds, insects, amphibians, fish, lizards, and arachnids of any type. He wanted to rescue the mouse. He had an idea. "Hi," said Quinn, strolling casually into the brouhaha. "I see you've found my mouse. Thanks. Tilly, I won't tell you again. Don't run away from me." Quinn pretended to address the mouse. "But," said the brown cat. "But," said the skinny grey cat. "But," said the bluish cat. But, before they had a chance to know what was happening, Quinn had bowled in, knocked the brown cat's paw off the mouse, picked up the still stunned mouse by the scruff of the neck, and trotted off back towards his bedroom. His heart was thumping in his ears, but he thought he had pulled it off. Just to be sure, he turned himself into his favourite type of dog and closed his jaws very gently over the mouse. The cats, by this time, had got a hold of themselves and were running after the strange cat. But all they saw when they came round to the side of the house was a very mean-looking yellow Labrador. The Labrador growled, and the cats ran off at great speed. "Phew," sighed Quinn. "That was close." The mouse started to struggle, and the taste of mouse on Quinn's tongue wasn't nice. He hadn't eaten meat since he was 6, and even when he had once turned himself into a vampire bat, he made sure it was a vegetarian vampire bat. He spat out the mouse. "Are you okay?" asked Quinn.
"How dare you almost eat me and then ask me if I'm okay?"
shouted the mouse. Although it was small, its shout was surprisingly loud.
"Of course I'm not okay. I only became a mouse so that I could look at my Christmas presents in Mum and Dad's wardrobe. I didn't know that Titus would chase me to the point of exhaustion and then be dumb enough to nearly give me away to one of his friends."
And then in a smaller voice,
"I want to go home."
the mouse went very quiet and shut its eyes. It looked like it was either going to sleep or trying not to cry. Even though it didn't look like the mouse was listening, Quinn chipped in. "I'm sorry, I was just trying to get you away from them, you see. I'm a vegetarian dog. I mean cat. Well..." Quinn shut his eyes again and held his breath. When he opened his eyes, he was back to the human Quinn, squatting in his PJs on the grass outside his bedroom window. And he was face to face with, not a mouse, but Lucy Apnovich, the girl from 2 doors down the road. Her ear was bleeding. They looked at each other, startled, and began to laugh. They never spoke about it again, but sometimes you'd see 2 dogs running away from the school together, or 2 birds sitting on a telephone wire watching groups of people at the bus stop. And I'm sure once I saw 2 elephants on the horizon, heading for the bush.
Now, of course, we'd all love to hear more stories, see more cartoons, listen to more songs. We've only got so much time during the classroom show, so after the classroom show, when you get home tonight, ask Mum and Dad if it's okay, of course, first, but pop along to the That's the Story YouTube channel. We've got more stories, more songs, more silliness, more cartoons than you can poke a stick at. And by the way, we've got a Who Am I competition coming up in a couple of moments. Let's have another story first, though.
Clara Button was an odd-looking girl. She had red frizzy hair that she wore in not 2, but 4 floppy pigtails tied up with pink tartan ribbon. Clara Button had big round eyes and a slightly protruding jawline that often made her look angry, even when she wasn't. Clara Button was tall, gangly even, some would say, and Clara Button had very, 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 very hairy legs. Clara Button was an intrepid adventurer. She could go anywhere, and wherever she chose to go, Clara Button was sure to meet with adventure and excitement. One day, Clara Button decided she'd go to the moon. She loaded up her spaceship with all the things she thought she might need. A good book, for the journey was bound to be a long one, a blanket for her hairy knees, her favourite lime green and banana yellow polka dot jumper, in case it got chilly, and of course a flask of her homemade herbal tea. Clara Button was ready. Clara Button put on her space helmet. It was a bit tricky to get it on over the 4 floppy pigtails tied up with pink tartan ribbon, but Clara Button eventually succeeded. Clara Button buckled herself into her spaceship and pushed the big red go button. The spaceship coughed and spluttered, and, after a great deal of rattling and shaking, eventually began to lift itself off the ground, and suddenly, zoom, they were off into space. Clara Button peered out of the window as her spaceship hurtled through the Milky Way. The stars were particularly bright. Clara Button hit the destination key on her in-flight space computer. She typed in 4 letters on her spaceship's keyboard. M-O-O-N. And with a whiz, a pop and a bang, the spaceship began to descend. Clara Button had landed on the moon. The door of the spaceship eased open, and Clara Button stepped outside. Well, the moon was certainly round, and yes, it was slightly green, but the smell of cheese wasn't too bad. Hello? Hello? Clara Button called out, "Is anybody there? Is anybody there? Is anybody there?" Clara Button looked around. She definitely felt as if someone or something was up there with her on the moon, but she couldn't see a thing. Clara Button felt a bit peckish. She stepped back inside her spaceship and grabbed her flask of homemade herbal tea and the rug she'd brought along to cover her hairy knees. Clara Button laid out her rug on the surface of the moon, sat down upon it and poured herself a lovely cup of herbal tea. She leant over and picked up a piece of moon. Green, maybe. Cheese, definitely. Clara Button ate the moon cheese, and then she leant over and ate some more. She heard a small squeak as she picked up another piece of the moon's surface. "Who's there? Who's there? Who's there?" Clara Button cried out, but still there was no response. After all the travel and a nice full belly, Clara Button began to feel a little sleepy. She lay down on her rug and shut her eyes. As Clara Button slept, the mice that lived on the moon crept out of the craters and holes where they'd been hiding.
What a cheek,
They said.
eating our moon, just helping herself, not so much as a please or thank you.
The mice decided that Clara Button needed to be taught a lesson, and they tipped over the flask of homemade herbal tea. They laughed to themselves and scuttled off back to their mousy moon holes. Clara Button awoke. She still had that strange feeling where you're certain that someone or something is watching you, but she still could only see the cheesy surface of the moon. However, it was odd that all the herbal tea had gone. Clara Button was sure she hadn't drunk it all. Oh well, time to go home. Clara Button got back into her spaceship and buckled herself in. As the spaceship left the moon's surface, Clara Button peered out of the window. The spaceship got higher and higher. Clara Button couldn't be sure. It was now so far away. But didn't she just see some mice dancing and cheering and waving pieces of moon cheese in the air? What was in that homemade herbal tea, thought Clara Button, the intrepid explorer, as the spaceship headed off back home. Everyone knew that the moon was made of green cheese, but the mice thing, that was just pure ridiculous.
Who am I? It's a game we play every week. I give you a whole lot of clues. From those clues, you've got to try and guess who it is we're talking about. It's that easy. Listen very carefully. Take notes. You can use Google if you want. Work as a team. Work as a pair. Just work. Have a very careful listen to these clues. Here they come.
What's his name? What's she called? I think I know who that is. Who could it be? Let's wait and see what the clues are to this quiz.
She was born on May the 12th, 1820 in Florence, Italy. She was named after the Italian city where she was born. She moved with her family to Great Britain in 1821, the year following her birth. She was raised in England at her family home in Emley, Hampshire. The family later relocated to Derbyshire. She was an outstanding nurse who became a war hero after attending the wounded soldiers during the Crimean War. She worked long, hard hours at the hospital attending to the injured. She became known as the Lady with the Lamp, as she would carry a lamp as she walked the hallways during nighttime hours.
What's his name? What's she called? I think I know who that is.
Did you figure it out? That one was an easy one. Now, let's hear a story about a chap that talks an awful lot. Sounds a little bit like me.
Mr. Talkative was so named not because of his lovely wavy hair that a lot of people were quite jealous of. Mr. Talkative wasn't called Mr. Talkative because of his bright yellow shorts he would wear all year round in rain or shine, frost or fine. No. Mr. Talkative was called Mr. Talkative because Mr. Talkative liked to talk. A lot. Once Mr. Talkative got going, there was nothing stopping him. While taking tea with Mrs. Kavanagh, he would go on.
Of course, most people believe that one Earth year is 365 days, but in actual fact, they're wrong. It's 365.256 days.
And on.
Did you know that there are 7 deadly sins, but only 4 cardinal virtues? Pride, greed, lust, envy, gluttony, anger, and sloth are the sins, and prudence, justice, temperance, and fortitude are the virtues. A little mismatched, don't you think? I suppose that means it's easier to sin than it is to be virtuous.
And on.
Earth's core temperature, that's the temperature right at the centre of the planet, 4,500 degrees Celsius. My goodness, you could boil a kettle down there.
He talked till the spots fell off the leopards at the zoo.
And speaking of water, did you know that the water-to-land ratio on planet Earth is 71% water and only 29% land?
Mr. Talkative would talk non-stop, day and night, night and day. He even talked in his sleep.
I once read somewhere that the sun is roughly 92 million miles away from planet Earth and it takes 7 minutes for the sun's light to reach us.
At the movies, he would keep it to a whisper, but he would still carry on and on and on.
You know, I find food to be most interesting. Pavlova was named after a famous ballerina, Anna Pavlova. Sally Lunn, I do like Sally Lunn, named after a pastry chef. The beef Wellington, named after the Duke of Wellington. Goodness gracious me, even the sandwich, named after the 11th Earl of Sandwich, so he could eat and play cards at the same time.
He talked till the cows came home and then left again because they couldn't stand all this non-stop chattering.
Here's a real brain tease for you. What have the capital letters A, E, F and H all have in common? Guess? Can you guess? Can you guess? Can you guess? I bet you can't. None of them have got curves. They're all made up of straight lines. Isn't that clever?
Once on a sunny day, the clouds threatened to come over and make it a miserable day, but Mr. Talkative, having no one else to talk to, started talking to the clouds and they blew away. He talked.
Did you know that planet Earth is 4,500 million years old?
And he talked.
And to actually get off the planet, you would need to be flying in your spaceship at a rate of 11.18 kilometers per second.
And he talked.
Outstanding, isn't it? Don't you just love trivia?
About the weather.
Oh, I do love clouds and their names: cirrocumulus, cirrostratus, altacumulus, altistratus, cumulus, stratus, stratocumulus.
About animals.
Did you know that the Queen's first corgi's name was Susan? And did you also know that John Lennon had a cat called Elvis? I bet you didn't know Bill Clinton's got a dog called Buddy.
About numbers.
Now here's an awfully big number. Pi. 3.14159265358979323.
Mr. Talkative had an awful lot to say.
Did you know that the word facetious has all the vowels in it and they're all in alphabetical order?
One day, Mr. Talkative stopped talking. Just like that. Nothing. Nada, zip, zilch, not a syllable. He was, as they say, as quiet as a mouse. The townspeople couldn't work it out. They called in the doctor. He did a most thorough examination of Mr. Talkative, looked down his throat, listened to his heart, got him to open his mouth and say, Sorry, the doctor said. There doesn't seem to be anything wrong with him. The townspeople got an audiologist to test everybody's hearing. Maybe he still is talking and we just can't hear him. But that was a silly idea because they could hear each other perfectly well. Then they got the police involved. Inspector Nosy, Chief of Police, did an exhaustive investigation, leaving no stone unturned. He searched high and low for Mr. Talkative's voice, but he found nothing. They had scientists do tests on the water to see if that had stopped Mr. Talkative from speaking. They had special investigators from NASA to see if aliens from outer space came down in their spaceships and stole Mr. Talkative's voice. But that didn't happen. Scientists looked, doctors looked, special investigators from NASA, even the police looked, but no one could figure out why Mr. Talkative had stopped talking. Exhausted, the whole town flopped down in the town square. They just couldn't understand it. Then Mr. Talkative stood up and everyone looked. He cleared his throat and said,
Excuse me.
Everyone was amazed.
Yes, look, sorry, I've stopped talking because I've finished what I had to say.
And he went home to make a nice cup of tea and do a little reading.
Quite simple, really.
After all, he had to find something else to talk about.
A horse cannot vomit, a crocodile cannot stick its tongue out, and a snail can sleep for 3 years. Recycling one glass jar saves enough energy to power a TV for 3 hours. Your hair has traces of gold and iron in it. Abraham Lincoln said a speech so captivating everyone forgot to take notes and the speech was lost.
We needed a ramp, not just some barely sloping, tiny, oh, is that it kind of ramp. We needed a gutsy, curvy, looping, seriously cool kind of ramp. to do the kind of daredevil superheroes type stunts we were planning, we needed something that would give us a good run-up to the Ring of Terror. This was the plan. Me, Benji, Leo and Zach would take our bikes to the top of the ramp while Leo's younger sister Poppy made sure none of our parents were coming. We would be seriously in for it if they caught us. Poppy was also in charge of emergency services. That meant she had to have the garden hose on and ready. In case the dogs from the neighbourhood came sniffing around, she also had a box of plasters and a bottle of cough medicine just in case. What we were going to do was use the treehouse at the back of Benji's place. We'd build the ramp off the tree hut and put the Ring of Terror at the bottom of the ramp, go round upside down in the ring, and then, ta-da, finish! Simple, easy, nothing to it. It was really important we get up enough speed before hitting the Ring of Terror. If we didn't, we'd be stuffed. That's why we chose the tree hut. It was the highest place we could get to. So after we collected wood from under Leo's house and Zach's backyard, nails from my garage, we started putting it all together. It took ages though. We didn't have a hammer. So we used all sorts of things to bang the nails in. Rocks, a broom handle, bricks, smaller pieces of wood and Benji's head. Nah, just kidding about Benji's head. Finally, the banging and building was finished. The four of us each had a bike. Benji and Zach would go up first, Leo and I would pass the bikes up to them and then climb up. That meant 4 people and 4 bikes in the treehouse at once. It was gonna be fantastic! Benji and Zach went up. Sweet, everything was going to plan. I passed a bike up to Leo, who was halfway up the ladder on the tree, and he hoisted it up to Benji and Zach. Oh, it was quite hot work. It's not as easy as it sounds, you know. Leo kept falling off the ladder because he couldn't hold on to the bike and the ladder or the tree at the same time. So we had to make some kind of safety rope for him. Really, we just tied him to the tree so he wouldn't fall off. Benji and Zach were hopeless. We didn't need 2 people up in the hut, so Zach came down and helped me. I should explain that the tree hut wasn't very high-tech. It was pretty much just a couple of pallets nailed onto a couple of branches a ways up the tree. By the time we got the 3rd bike up, it was looking kind of cramped up there. We should have noticed the hut starting to lean and the branches starting to bend then. We finally got the last bike up, untied Leo from the tree and started to climb. The 4 bikes took up heaps of room. Leo and Benji looked really nervous. I thought it was because of the Ring of Terror, but as soon as I got to the top of the ladder with Zach close behind, I understood. There was a strange kind of creaking. I quickly got up onto the hut. Zach was starting to panic and was yelling at us to hurry up and help him up. The creaking was now a groaning. We were all on a definite lean. I hadn't realised the treehouse was quite so high up. The groaning was now a cracking and a howling, screeching, or was that Poppy warning us that our parents were coming? A snapping, my heart was banging in my chest and I could hear the blood pumping hard in my ears. The 4 of us hollered as the pallets, Mike, Zach, Benji, Leo and me fell from the tree and crashed to the ground. A heap of boys, bikes and a tree hut. I think we'll go with Plan B.
Spread the word. We need your help. The That's the Story YouTube channel needs more subscribers. Pop along. It's got stories, it's got songs, it's got cartoons, it's got silliness. Do pop along. Now, your imagination, it's a pretty wild place.
What's that out my window? What's that under my bed? What's that hiding in my wardrobe? What's that making me scared? It's just me and my imagination. Who's that riding the dinosaur? Who's that walking on the moon? Who's that flying I saw? Who's that running away with the spoon? It's just me and my imagination. What's that over by the door? my imagination. It's just me and my imagination. It's just me and my imagination. It's just me and my imagination.
Did you figure out what the common theme of all of our stories and songs was this week? That's my lot for another week. Thanks ever so much for joining me. Have a good one. I'll catch you again next week. Ka kite anō.
That's the story that I wanna hear.